Chevy reveals their Truck Series Silverado. RCR is once again expanding to a 2-car Xfinity Series team. And let's look at the stats to determine who the championship for at Phoenix will be. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I hope you all have had a fantastic week. I want to open the show real quick by thanking everyone once again who tuned into the Groovy Hollow 200 Wednesday night, that iRacing event that we put on with AE Engine and Podium Esports to benefit Extra Life. By the end of the night, we actually raised more than $6,000. That's all going to the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals. A huge thank you to everyone who donated, and a thank you again to Josh Berry for playing along and joining the event as our mystery driver of the Halloween machine. You can actually see the Halloween machine race in real life this Saturday at Martinsville in the Xfinity race, so that's a pretty cool crossover, very exciting stuff. But thanks again to everyone who tuned into the Groovy Hollow 200 and helped contribute to a great cause. We've got a lot of news to catch up on today. Earlier this week, there was a next-gen car test at Bowman Gray Stadium to prepare for the LA Clash this coming February. Tony Stewart drove the car during the Goodyear tire test portion, and then Dale Earnhardt Jr. from NBC and Clint Boyer from Fox also took turns making some laps so that they got an understanding for a feel for the car before they have to, of course, talk about it on TV all of next year. Tony Stewart didn't have a lot to say, at least publicly, to the media, but Dale Earnhardt Jr. did talk about how much better the brakes are. He said that this car, the next gen, does everything better than the current Gen 6. But he really focused in on the brakes as well as the difference in the tires. Obviously bigger, larger radius wheels on the next gen than the current Gen 6. Lower profile, of course. I think they're wider as well. If you're like looking at the car straight on, I believe they're wider as well. So different wheels leads to a different feeling of grip underneath them. So Dale Earnhardt Jr. pointed those things out. Sounds like the test went fairly well. It sounds like they have a pretty good tire combination idea, at least for the LA Clash. That's an important event because it's obviously in LA. It's inside of a football stadium. There's going to be a lot of fans pouring into it. It's the week before the Super Bowl, so there's going to be a lot of media attention, a lot of focus on that event. But it's also important because that's the first time we will see the next gen car in action, in competition, so it needs to go well. I think Goodyear sounds like they're in a pretty good spot after that test, but you all probably seen the clips of the cars going around in circles at Bowman Gray. That's a pretty cool sight to see NASCAR cars at Bowman Gray. That's neat. Anyway, some other big news today, some Xfinity Series silly season type news. Richard Childress Racing is once again expanding to a 2-car Xfinity team. They're gonna have 2 full-time drivers next year. We already know about the defending Truck Series champion Sheldon Creed. He's gonna join RCR next year, but today it was announced that Austin Hill, another Truck Series veteran, I think we can say at this point, will also drive full-time for RCR in Xfinity next year. No confirmation yet what their car numbers will be. I assume it'll be the 2 and the 21, but who gets which, I think that remains to be seen. It's great to see RCR, a competitive Xfinity Series team, once again field 2 full-time cars. Both Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill, they will be championship contenders next year, or at the very least playoff contenders. I will be shocked if they miss the playoffs. Sheldon Creed, obviously the results speak for themselves. He's still in contention for another Truck Series championship this season, but Austin Hill as well. 8 Truck Series wins across the last 3 seasons. He's got 2 wins this year driving that 16 truck for Hattori, so I think this is a solid pickup. We know Austin Hill brings some funding. I know he's had a lot of support from like United Rentals in the past, but he's one of those drivers that's had some funding that's also gotten results on the track more often than not. He's been very competitive in that 16 truck since he stepped foot in it. He's 27 years old, so he's not like a young prospect or anything, but I think that actually will aid him in his quest for an Xfinity Series title. I think that added, those added few years of experience that guys like Ty Gibbs don't have, that Sam Mayer doesn't have, I think that will actually play into Austin Hill's strengths. RCR looks like a very formidable Xfinity Series team once again, which is great to see. A lot of fans, of course, wondering what this means for Myatt Snider, who of course ran full-time for RCR this season. He does not seem to have a place within the main RCR organization, but it sounds like there's a real possibility he will land with maybe one of the RCR affiliate teams, of which there are really several in the Xfinity Series. Teams like Jordan Anderson Racing's been working closely with RCR this year, or like Big Machine Racing. I think they announced earlier this month that they're going to have a closer relationship with RCR next year. So there could be a spot for Myatt Snider with one of those teams, either part-time or full-time. We'll just have to wait and see, but I'm very excited about RCR's 2022 Xfinity lineup. I think both of these drivers are going to be championship threats. Of course, this now means there's a competitive ride in the Truck Series without a driver for next season. Who goes to Hattori? It's a Toyota ride, it's the 16 truck. I don't know, I think KBM seems to have a pretty solid lineup. I think Chandler Smith has been solid this year. He's still in championship contention right now, going into Martinsville this weekend. John Nemechek, we know, is returning to KBM next year, so maybe I look at the other young Toyota drivers, guys like Corey Heim, maybe that becomes a spot for him to ride. I have no idea. We'll see who gets that 16 truck. I don't know who it's going to be. We'll have to wait and find out. Really quick, before we talk Martinsville, let's keep things rolling with the truck series, because today Chevrolet revealed the all-new Silverado that will run in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series next year, and it looks pretty good. I can't really tell if this is a real image of the truck or if this is sort of a rendering. The wrap looks really cool. I love that sort of next-gen style Chevy scheme. But now this means all three manufacturers have revealed their new truck series bodies for 2022. If we look at them all real quick, if I had to kind of put them in a pecking order, rank them real quick, I think the Ford looks best. Maybe it's just the wrap that I really like. That's certainly helping, but I think the front end of the F-150 looks really, really sharp. I'm gonna put the Chevy Silverado in second place. A lot of people are down on the Toyota Tundra look. I actually like it okay, but it still falls in line probably third in my opinion. These aren't gonna be completely different trucks or anything like that. It's not like what the Cup Series is doing, going from the Gen 6 to the next gen, a completely new race car from the ground up. No, the trucks are basically gonna be the same next year as they've been this year. It's just the car body, the truck body, I guess, that's really gonna look different. I think they all look decent. I think they all look good. I think the truck series was due for a little bit of a facelift, but just want to make that clear. We're not saying complete wholesale changes of the truck series next year. It's primarily cosmetic, but I think the Chevy truck looks pretty good. I don't really have any major complaints about any of these new truck series looks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are 34 races into the Cup Series season. That means there are only 2 races left. And this Sunday night, Halloween night at Martinsville, we will see the 8 drivers left in the playoffs cut in half. Oh, okay, wait, no, not like cut in half, like, no, like, I mean like the field, the size of the field will be cut in half. Really went full Halloween for a minute there. 8 will be trimmed down to 4. The championship 4 to compete at Phoenix next weekend will be set Sunday night. So let's look at the numbers. Who's in the best point spot? Who needs to win? Let's go through every single contender right here, right now. The only driver that's locked into Phoenix is, of course, Kyle Larson. He's already won twice in this round. He is locked in. Let's skip him for now. We'll talk about him next week. Let's start then with Chase Elliott, the defending series champion. He is plus 34, second on the playoff grid right now. He has a huge cushion to that final transfer spot. And things are shaping up well for Chase Elliott. In his last 3 Martinsville races, he's finished 2nd, 1st, and 5th. Of course, he won this very race last year in a clutch situation. He led nearly half the laps and won to lock himself into Phoenix, where of course he went on to win the championship last year. So Chase Elliott is in a very good situation right now. His number 1 goal Sunday night should be to not crash out in stage 1. That's about it. If he collects any stage points in stage 1, I think fans will be feeling really good about the 9 teams' chances. Really, the only wild card in the Chase Elliott story right now is Kevin Harvick. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on the Kevin Harvick drama. I think finally, perhaps, I saw Harvick joking about the situation on FS1 this week. I think maybe finally Harvick has started to move on. Chase Elliott's moved on. I don't expect any retaliation. I don't expect any funny business from Kevin Harvick Sunday night. But if the two are racing close together, are racing for position, and Elliott does anything, looks at Harvick wrong in any way, you might get the bumper. And when you get the bumper at Martinsville, sometimes things happen that are beyond your control. You go spinning, you get T-boned by somebody, things can happen. Things can stack up really quickly at Martinsville. So that's the only worry I have for Chase Elliott, is that he does have a lingering rivalry, if you will, with Kevin Harvick. So that could rear its ugly head at some point during the evening. I don't think it will, but it's something to keep in the back of your minds. Let's move on to the 3rd place guy on the playoff grid, another driver with a large points cushion, at least on paper, Denny Hamlin. Plus 32. When you look at the stat sheet, Denny Hamlin's numbers at Martinsville are as good or better than anyone else's in the field. He has 5 career wins at the paperclip. But it's worth mentioning that all of those wins came before the year 2016. So it's been a little while since Denny Hamlin won himself a grandfather clock, but he is still one of the best here. Earlier this year in the spring race at Martinsville, he finished 2nd in both stage 1 and stage 2. He finished 3rd in the race. If he does that on Sunday, he's a lock. He's making it to Phoenix, no questions asked. He doesn't even have to be that good. He can be like 6th, 7th place in the stages. He'll be fine. We know the Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas have been very strong at the 750 horsepower tracks, especially Martin Truex Jr., but Denny Hamlin as well. He did win at Darlington to open the playoffs. Not anything like Martinsville, but it is at least a 750 horsepower track. Hamlin's shown the ability to win races here in these playoffs. He did lead nearly half the laps at Richmond a few weeks back, which is maybe the closest track we can compare to Martinsville. It's a 3/4 of a mile short track. Martinsville's a half mile, less banked though. I don't know. Hamlin's got some momentum on his side. He's plus plus 32. I feel really good about Denny's chances. Now let's look at the bubble. Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin's teammate, +1. He is currently in, but he's only in by that much. Busch has 2 career wins at Martinsville, but his last one came back in 2017. He has not led any laps at Martinsville since 2018. He finished 10th at Martinsville back in the spring, and we'll go back last year to this race a year ago. He finished 9th. You'll remember he got dumped by Kevin Harvick on the last lap, and I don't think that cost him any spots. It was right before the finish line. He still finished 9th. So I'd expect a top 10 from Kyle Busch this weekend, but when you're only +1 and you've got guys like Martin Truex and Ryan Blaney, some Martinsville experts behind you, I would not be feeling comfortable if I'm a Kyle Busch fan right now, and I picked him at the beginning of these playoffs to make the championship 4. I'm having some doubts, so let's move on to the first driver currently out. I just mentioned him. Ryan Blaney is -1, and you got to feel bad for Ryan Blaney. Last weekend at Kansas, a lot of playoff drivers shot themselves in the foot. Kyle Busch hitting the wall multiple times, Chase Elliott at the end scraping the wall, Brad Keselowski got into the wall and kind of squeezed Truex into it as well. A lot of these drivers cut tires down. Blaney had an issue early in the race, but he bounced back, was up and running inside the top 10 when on a restart, Austin Dillon, not in the playoffs, just got tight, got loose, got something, and wiped out Blaney. Just an accident. Just a case of bad luck. And I think bad luck is often an overused phrase in the world of racing, but I think that's how you could describe Ryan Blaney's situation at Kansas. He was going to be in a great points position until that wreck. Instead, he is right there on the bubble. He's going to one of his best tracks statistically. He has never won at Martinsville in his young career, but he finished 2nd in both 2020 races, and earlier this year in the spring, he swept stage 1 and stage 2, finished first in both. He ended up finishing 11th in the race, but the speed out of that 12 car at Martinsville is clear. Blaney's got some momentum. This has been by far the best statistical season of his Cup Series career. 3 wins, granted all with the high downforce rules package, but his average finish this season is also the best of his career. He's got a ton of momentum. I'd feel pretty good about Ryan Blaney. If not for that wreck last weekend at Kansas, that was not his fault. He would likely be up there with Hamlin and Chase Elliott with a huge points cushion. As is, the pressure is on. He's a younger driver. Can he live up to expectations and get the job done at Martinsville? If he's going to, one driver for sure will be standing in his way, and that is Martin Truex Jr., who was really bailed out by the troubles Kyle Busch found himself in, that Blaney ended up finding himself in, because Martin Truex Jr. was poised to be in a deep points hole coming into Martinsville. Instead, he's only -3, and there's nobody better at Martinsville the last few years. He's won 3 of the past 4 Martinsville races, including earlier this year in the spring. He's led a combined 745 laps here in just the last 4 races. Goodness. And there's a reason Martin Truex Jr. was my championship pick before these playoffs began. The end of the season, Martinsville, Phoenix, 750 horsepower, low downforce tracks. Martin Truex Jr. has 4 wins this year, all at 750 horsepower low downforce tracks. Something about this style racing Joe Gibbs Racing has hit on, James Small has hit on, and Martin Truex Jr. thrives with it. He won at Martinsville earlier this year. He actually won at Phoenix earlier this year as well. He's won at Richmond. He's won at Darlington earlier in the season. He struggled somewhat with consistency in these playoffs, but these last 2 weeks were both mile-and-a-half intermediate tracks, not Truex's strong suit. I think now that they're going to Martinsville, his playground, he's going to be strong. He is going to be tough to beat. That's why I talked about Kyle Busch being +1. He can't be feeling good when you got Truex and Blaney hot on your heels at Martinsville. Let's talk about 7th and 8th place. A couple of Penske drivers. Brad Keselowski is -6. Not in a must-win situation at all, but he's going to need to be perfect. He does have 2 career wins here, and actually his average finish for his career at Martinsville is 11.17. That's despite making 23 starts. That's a really good number. The spring race didn't go very well for him. I went back and watched it the other day, and he was involved in several incidents, most of them not his fault. He was just getting run over by people, but I don't know, something about the spring race, he found himself in bad situations repeatedly. So momentum may not be on Brad Keselowski's side, but hey, I picked him to be eliminated in the round of 16. Here he is in the round of 8, still within striking distance of the championship 4. I've underestimated Brad Keselowski all playoffs long, it appears. I'm afraid of making that mistake again. But let's talk about his teammate Joey Logano. He is the one driver on this list that is in a virtual must-win situation. -26. It seems like everyone we've talked about is good at Martinsville, and Joey Logano is no exception. He's won here back in 2018, and he should have won this race back in 2015, let's be honest. He's finished 6th, 3rd, 4th, and 8th in his last 4 Martinsville races, so very consistent, but he's going to need to win. Top 5 isn't going to do it. He needs to win on Sunday, and I'm just not confident that he'll be able to do it. His only win this season, he's been very consistent all year long, but his only win was at the Bristol Dirt Race, which is kind of its own oddball. There's really no comparable event to it. So whatever he learned or had at Bristol Dirt is not going to translate to Martinsville this weekend. I think Joey Logano will run inside the top 10, will probably run inside the top 5 for a good portion of this race, but he's going to need to win, and I don't think he's going to get it done. So I've gone through the entire field, the entire 8 playoff drivers left. Now let me give you my predictions. Kyle Larson obviously is locked into Phoenix. We already know that. I think Chase Elliott and I think Denny Hamlin will make it. If they were, drivers that had historically struggled at Martinsville, maybe there'd be a question, but not only do they have large cushions, they're also really good at Martinsville. So I think Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin, unless something funky happens, big wreck, they get caught up in somebody else's mess, unless something like that happens, they will finish good enough to make the championship 4. So really, you've got 5 drivers competing for that 4th and final spot, and it's a 1-point gap currently between Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney. I know I picked him at the beginning of these playoffs to make the championship 4, but I don't think Kyle Busch is going to get it done this weekend. He seemed rattled pretty much all playoffs long, since the first race back at Darlington, when he wrecked himself, of course, and then barreled through those cones going into the garage area and got a fine for that, to last weekend at Kansas. Scrapes the wall early on, it's killed. He drove back into like 8th, 9th place, and then wrecks, hits the wall again, makes the same mistake twice in one race. Not to mention in the middle of the race, remember, he was shouting at Bubba Wallace, just belligerent over the radio, incomprehensible pretty much. I just don't think Kyle Busch is in championship focused mode right now. I just don't think he is. So I don't think Kyle Busch makes it in after Martinsville. The fact that Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney are the 2 guys right behind him, that's obviously working against Kyle Busch. It really comes down to those 2 in my opinion. I think Brad Keselowski will put up a valiant effort. I think Joey Logano will maybe have a shot at some point. Maybe he'll throw out a contrary strategy and try to steal the win, but I think it's going to come down to Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney. Youth versus veteran championship driver for that final playoff spot. I'll be honest, I picked Martin Truex Jr. to make the championship 4, to win the championship at the beginning of these playoffs, but I'm rooting for Ryan Blaney, mainly because I feel bad that he got taken out at Kansas. Blaney ran well enough at Texas and Kansas to put himself in a great spot going into this race, but extenuating circumstances took him out. Chase Elliott had his big moment in this race last year when he got the win. I think this is Ryan Blaney's turn to have a similar big clutch moment. Prove to the world that you are the future of Team Penske. That's no disrespect to Brad Keselowski, but they're letting him go after this season. That's no disrespect to Joey Logano, who won a championship just a few years ago. But Ryan Blaney has been their best driver. The 12 has been their best team this season. Ryan Blaney is in position to seal the deal this weekend at Martinsville. So I'm rooting for Ryan Blaney. I really want to see it happen, but I don't think it will. It's called Martinsville for a reason. I think Martin Truex Jr., like I predicted back in September, will lock himself into the championship 4. He won at Martinsville earlier this year. He didn't dominate that race, but we know how good he has been and can be at Martinsville. I think Truex wins it this weekend. I think he locks himself through victory lane, but I think it will be a very interesting storyline to watch. Youth versus experience. Which side will come out on top? I think they'll be in very equal cars. Maybe Truex gets the slight advantage because I think JGR has been really good at the 750 tracks, but this will be a very interesting matchup for fans to watch. So I think Truex makes it in alongside his teammate Denny Hamlin and the 2 Hendrick cars, Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, of course. That's my championship 4 prediction. Will a Penske driver spoil the show and sneak in? We'll have to wait and find out. But leave your thoughts down below. I ran through a lot of stats. I gave you guys my arguments, but I want to hear who your championship 4 is at this point. So leave a comment down in the description below. That's all I've got for this episode. Big thank you to Work Pro Tools for sponsoring this Martinsville preview. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And as always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this show without your continued support every single month. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll be back Sunday night after the Martinsville cutoff race. It's gonna be a good time. I'm excited. Hope you guys are as well. I'll see you then. Have a great weekend, y'all.